Good morning, all of you. We will continue with the play Mother's Day, Snapshots, Chapter 5. Okay, we are on page 43. We have finished page 43. Okay, now before we start with page 44, just a little bit from page 43 again. Okay, now we have already done till the place that Cyril and Doris, they come, and their mother, Mrs. Annie Pearson, she has a conversation with both of them, and now both of them find the behavior of their mother quite weird, because she has never behaved with them like this, and means in such a severe manner, and not even had the tea ready for them. And now the children, they simply wanted to see that what will happen when father comes back. And so we just did that. George Pearson, he comes, and he is a decent man, around 50 years. He's serious type, but he is pompous. He is self importance. He has a lot of self importance, and he is quite arrogant about it. And then when he comes, he noticed that Doris has tears in her eyes, and so he asks her that, hello, what's this? Means, why are you crying? So Doris, she is still sobbing, and she says that you will see. So Doris, she runs out of the stage, and George, now he stares at her for a moment, and then he looks at Mrs. Pearson, because it has never been like that in their family. And why? Because Mrs. Annie Pearson, like I told you, she's a very soft natured lady, and she never wanted to hurt anyone in her family. She was too fond of her family members, loved them so much, always followed whatever they told her to do, and just simply ran after them, doing their errands and everything. And now today Doris is crying, and she's simply sitting doing nothing. And so that is why George, after Doris, she runs off the room, and so George, he stares after Doris for a moment, and then he looks at Mrs. Pearson, and then George, he asks Mrs. Pearson that, did she say you'll see? So Mrs. Pearson says yes, and so he asks that, what does she mean by that? Yes, good morning, Gaurav. And so Mrs. Pearson says that, why don't you ask her? Better ask her. And then George, he has never got this sort of reply from his wife before. And so he again looks at the door, and then again back at Mrs. Pearson, and then he notices that Mrs. Pearson is drinking stout. What is stout?
Mama, strong beer.
Okay, a strong dark colored beer. And so he notices the stout, and Mrs. Pearson raises a glass for another sip. And when he sees that, his eyes, they almost bulge, means as if they will pop out. And George is like, stout? And Mrs. Pearson, yes. So George says, he's totally amazed, and he says that, what are you drinking stout for? So she says, because I fancied some, I wanted some, and I wanted to have some, that's why. So George is like, and at this time of the day? So she says, yes, what's wrong with this time of the day? And George, he is confused, he is bewildered. He says, nothing. I suppose, Annie, but I have never seen you do it before. So he says that, no, I don't think so, there's anything wrong with it, but I have never seen you drinking stout before. So Mrs. Pearson like, well, you're seeing it now. And so George, he did not like that, and he says that, uh, yes, and I don't like it. It doesn't look right, and I'm surprised at you. So when he said that, I'm surprised at you, so Mrs. Pearson, she says, well, that's a nice change for you. So he's not able to understand, and so he asks that, what do you mean? So she says that, it must have been quite some time since the last time you were surprised at me. And George, he still does not like answers, and what reply she is given. And so he says, I don't like surprises, and I am a very steady kind of person, all right, very stable, balanced kind of person and don't like surprises, and this you ought to have known by now. And then he says, and by the way, I forgot to tell you in the morning that today I won't be needing any tea in the evening, and we have a special snooker match tonight and at the club, and then after that we'll have supper there also, so I don't want any tea. What is supper? Any idea? Yes, class 11th.
Ma'am, snacks.
All
Evening
right.
snacks.
Okay. You could say evening snacks or evening meal, light. Okay. Light evening meal or light evening snack, you can say. uh, Basically meal, light evening meal. So he says that there they will have a light evening meal also, and so he does not want tea, obviously, something like a high tea, you could say. And so Mrs. Pearson says, okay, that's all right if you don't want tea, because there isn't any, you don't want it, and we don't have any tea. And now George is astonished. He's like, you mean you didn't get any tea ready? So Mrs. Pearson says, obviously, yes. And don't you think it is a good thing also? As it turned out to be, means it is a good thing that there's no tea ready, and obviously you don't even want it. So George, he is aggrieved at this. He does not like it. He is resentful, and he says, you know, that's means this aggrieved here means, he was feeling as if he has been treated unfairly by his wife, and he says that, that's all very well, but what if I wanted some? And so Mrs. Pearson, she is not able to take it. She says, my goodness, just listen to this man. He is angry because I didn't get him the tea ready, and that tea which he doesn't even want. And so obviously she is so mad. She's saying that you only said that you don't want tea, and now when I have not got the tea ready, then you're getting mad at me. And so she says that, have you ever tried it at the club? So George, tried at the club? Tried what at the club? So Mrs. Pearson, she says, going at the bar and telling them that you don't want a glass of beer, but you are angry at them because they have not poured out a glass for you. Try that on them, and then see what you get. So she says, just when he asks that what tried what at the club, so she says that, have you ever tried going to the bar and then telling the bartender there that you are angry at them because they have not poured out a glass of beer for you, which you don't even want, means you don't want it, but still you are angry at them because they have not poured it out for you. And so George, he's like, I don't know what you are talking about. And so now Mrs. Pearson, she is simply going on, and she says, and then if you do something like that, then they even laugh more at you than they already do. So now he's angry, annoyed, and he says, laugh at me? They don't laugh at me, means the people at the club. So Mrs. Pearson, she says, of course they do, and obviously by this time you should have found out already, and anyone else would have been at your place, he would have already found out that they all laugh at you. And then she says, you are one of their standing jokes. Standing jokes, any idea what does it mean by standing jokes? Anyone? It is something that makes you or that something that amuses you on a regular basis. All right, or you can say something that makes you laugh on a regular basis. So she said that you are one of their standing jokes, means you are a constant source of amusement for them, and you are quite famous among them, and they even call you Pompey Pearson. And why? Because they think that you are so slow and pompous. So now she is not saving anything. And Mrs. Pearson, why she is behaving like this? Because obviously that now she has the spirit of Mrs. Fitzgerald in her, and Mrs. Fitzgerald by nature, she is very bold and dominating, and obviously she wanted to set things right here for Mrs. Annie Pearson. And so that is why she is all guns blazing, and she is setting each one of them in their right places. And so she tells George that they laugh at you and you should have found it out, and anyone in your place would have already found it out, and you are one of their standing jokes. They laugh at you always, and they call you Pompey Pearson. Why? Because if you remember, when we studied about Pearson, that when he enters, he's a slow type of person, and then he is also very pompous, very arrogant and self-important type, and so that is why they used to laugh at him. And George, he is horrified to hear that, and he says, never, means obviously no, they don't call me all that. And so Mrs. Pearson, she says, I've always beaten me. Why you should want to spend so much time at a place where they're always laughing at you? And what he is responding and reacting, Mrs. Pearson, she is not taking into account all that. She's simply going on, and she's like, you know I am never able to understand that why you want to go and spend so much time at a place where they are always laughing behind your back and they are calling you names. Means, why would anyone want to go to a place where people are always laughing and making fun? All right. And then she goes on to say that leaving your wife at home night after night, instead of going out with her, who doesn't make you look a fool. And so she adds and says that I don't understand why you do like this, that why you want to spend so much time at a place where people laugh at you, where they make fun at you, and because of that you leave your wife at home day after day, night after night. Means night, because he goes out at night time, night after night you leave her, and you don't go out with her. And if you go out with her, obviously she will not make you look like a fool, but still you don't do anything like that. And so on this, Cyril, he enters from the right door, and he has a glass of milk in one hand and a thick slice of cake in the other. And George, he is almost dazed, like he doesn't know, means what is all this going on. And so George turns to Cyril appealingly, means like, see what is she saying? And George, then he says, hey Cyril, you have been with me at the club once or twice, and you tell that they don't laugh at me and they don't call me Pompey Pearson, do they? And Cyril, he is embarrassed. He doesn't know, and he hesitates. He doesn't know what to say, because obviously he also knows all this. And so angrily, uh, because Cyril, he does not respond and he hesitates. And so George, he is getting mad, and he says, go on, tell me, do they call me Pompey Pearson, and do they laugh at me? And so Cyril, obviously he is embarrassed. He does not want to talk to to his dad like that, and he says, well, yes dad, I'm afraid they do call you names and they do laugh at you. And so George slowly, he looks from one to the other, means from Mrs. Pearson to Cyril, and he is and staggered means, when you move with unsteady steps, as if you're about to fall. So he is staggered, means he's like, he has never imagined this to have happened, and this to be the case. And now, when it is out, so he is like, what is all this? And so he looks from one to the other, and then George, he slowly, he says, well, I'll be damned. I'll be damned. Damned basically means when somebody is condemned for a punishment. So he says, well, then I'll be damned means I'm there for punishment. And so George, he exits from the left side of the stage slowly, and he moves as if somebody has hit him over the head, means and he behaves as if someone has hit him on the head. And in that dazed manner, he crosses over the stage. And Cyril, after he watches his father go, and he turns angrily at his mother and says that, now mother, you shouldn't have told him that, mom, and that is not fair. You have hurt his feelings and you have hurt mine also. And Mrs. Pearson, still she is so cool, and she says, well, sometimes it does good people to have their feelings hurt, means it is sometimes good for the people if they get their feelings hurt. The truth oughtn't to hurt anybody for long, means, and if you get to know the truth, obviously truth never hurts anybody for long. And then she said, if your father didn't go to the club so often, perhaps they'd stop laughing at him. And then she says that, if your father does not go to the club so often, means, night after night he went to the club all alone, leaving his wife at home, and there being with his friends and companions, and they all, the people at the club, they laughed at him, they made fun of him, they called him names. And so she says that, sometimes it is better if people, they if their feelings are hurt, and if they get to know the truth, because truth doesn't hurt anybody for long. And then your father, they wouldn't have laughed so much, they won't laugh at him so much, and neither make so much fun of him, if he didn't go to the club so often. And so Cyril, he's gloomy, he's like, I doubt it, I don't think so. And Mrs. Pearson, very severely, she says, possibly you do, but what I doubt is whether your opinions is worth having. What do you know? Nothing. You spend too much time and good money. And then, because when Mrs. Pearson, she says that, if he will not go to the club so often, then obviously they will not laugh at him so much. So on that, Cyril says that, I doubt it, I don't think so. And Mrs. Pearson, now she gets angry at him, says, possibly, I think maybe you doubt it, but what I doubt is, and then she says, but what I doubted is that your opinion, it does not matter. I don't want your opinion. Your opinion is not even worth having. Why? Because what do you know? You know nothing. You spend so much time and your money at greyhound races and dirt tracks and ice shows. And then, when Cyril, he says that he thinks that no, that won't be the case. So now mom, she gets angry at him, and she says that, your opinion is not worth having. Why? Because you know nothing. When you spend your precious time and money on greyhound races. What a greyhound? Greyhound is a type of a dog breed. Tall, slender dogs, and they are capable of very high speed, and that is why they're used for hunting as well as for racing. So she says, you spend so much of your time at greyhound races and at the dirt tracks and ice shows, so obviously I don't need your opinion. And so Cyril, now he is also sulking, says, well, what if I do? I've got to enjoy myself somehow. And so Cyril, on that, he says, but even if I do that, then what is it? All right. And obviously I have to enjoy myself, I have to do something for my enjoyment. So Mrs. Pearson, she says, I wouldn't mind so much if you were really, and now she's really telling him that sometimes we feel that, okay, we are doing a certain thing because it gives us some amusement and enjoyment. But here mother, she knows her son well, and she says that if you had been enjoying yourself, then obviously I wouldn't have mind so much. But if you were really enjoying, but are you? And where is it is getting you? There's a sharp hurried knocking heard of left. And so she says to her son that even if you were spending so much time and energy and money on things which really brought you enjoyment, so obviously I wouldn't have minded so much. But is it really making you happy? And see, where is it leading you or getting you? And then at that moment there is a hurried knocking at the door. And so Cyril says that maybe there is someone for me, I'll see. So he goes to answer the door. And Cyril, he hurries to the left side, and then in a moment he re-enters and he closes the door behind him. And then Cyril, he says to his mother, it's that silly old bag from next door, Mrs. Fitzgerald. You don't want her here, do you? And so he goes to the door, he sees who's there, he again comes in, and he tells her mother that it's that silly old bag. Now silly old bag, basically it is a, as you can see, it is an insulting word for an old woman. So he says that, that silly old bag, means that silly old woman from the next door, Mrs. Fitzgerald, she is there. And then he says that, I don't think so. You want her here, do you? And so Mrs. Pearson, very sharply, she says, certainly, obviously, I want her in. You go, ask her in, and you don't call her silly old bag either. And she's a very nice woman, and she has a lot of sense than you'll ever have. So, when Cyril, he calls her uh, and silly old bag, so mom, now obviously she is disciplining her son, and saying that, it is not the right way to talk, all right? And you go out, you bring her in, and never again you call her silly old bag again. Why? Because she is a very nice woman, and she has a lot of sense, more sense than you will ever have in your life. And so Cyril, he leaves this stage from the left door, and then Mrs. Pearson, she also finishes her stout. And after finishing her stout, she smacks her lips, like, when you have had something tasty and delicious, like you smack your lips, with your lips, with your tongue. And so she smacks her lips, and then Cyril, he re-enters from the left, and he ushering in, means, when you have someone as your guest, so you usher that person in. So he ushers in Mrs. Fitzgerald. And now Mrs. Fitzgerald, when she is at the doorway, she is hesitating. You need to remember that now Mrs. Fitzgerald, she has Mrs. Pearson's spirit in her. And Mrs. Pearson was a very nervous kind of lady, and so she hesitates at the door. And Mrs. Pearson, she says, come in, Mrs. Fitzgerald. And Mrs. Fitzgerald, she moves to the left, and she's, anxious and worried. I just wondered if everything's all right. So, obviously she was anxious, she was nervous, because she knew that now, obviously, Mrs. Fitzgerald's spirit was in her body, and she was there at her house. So obviously she was worried to know that is everything all right or not. And so Cyril, he says, no, everything is not right. And Mrs. Pearson, she sharply says, of course it is, means everything is fine, you be quiet. So Cyril is like, why should I be quiet? So now Mrs. Pearson, she shouts and says, you need to be quiet because I tell you to. All right, you silly spoiled young pecan. Pecan is again foolish person. So she shouts at her son and says that you will be quiet because I am telling you, and you silly spoiled pecan, means foolish person. And Mrs. Fitzgerald, now Mrs. Pearson says that to Cyril, but obviously in Mrs. Fitzgerald body we have Mrs. Annie Pearson spirit, and so she does not like it when she talks to Cyril in that manner. So she protests and says, oh no, surely. And Mrs. Pearson very civilly says, now Mrs. Fitzgerald, you let me manage my family in my own way, and please. But Cyril's like, yes, but Cyril. And Cyril is, he's like, because Mrs. Fitzgerald took his first name, and out of proper etiquettes, it is not the way that they address people like that when you don't know people so well. So obviously you don't address them with their first name just like that. And it is like, with proper, like madam, ma'am, Mr. And so he says that no, it is not Cyril for you, it is Mr. Cyril Pearson to you, please, Mrs. Fitzgerald. And then saying that, Cyril, he walks out of the stage into the kitchen. Okay, so for today we will stop here. Have you all understood what we have done today? Is it clear to all of you?
Yes, ma'am.
All right.
Yes, ma'am.